Hey, what's up? Long time, no nothing. So, how's it going? Back again after a little bit of hiatus to finally wrap up this season. Thank you for everyone who's tuning in right now. Starting, I think, for the first time early ever in a stream ever in my entire life. I really have no excuse, but just the way of things. I think I'm actually starting early on this one, a couple of minutes. So, better late than never. I always say, what is up at the Silent Revolution? What is up, Matt D? I am all good. I hope you've been taking care of yourself as well, everyone. Yeah, so like I said, here to sort of wrap up this season one of Breaking Bad. What is up, Ben? As well, I'm doing good. Can't complain. A free man who lives in America. Not too shabby, if I may say so myself. I hope you guys are all doing well yourself here. And yeah, I guess I'll start here in a little bit. I'll wait, I guess, until 10 o'clock to really sort of get into this episode. But it was funny. I was rewatching this episode for the 99th time, and it's kind of cool. I was really sort of watching it and really noticing a ton of just various themes here that are actually quite interesting and quite sort of thought provoking and really make you think, and are really sort of interesting subject matters that would be kind of cool to delve into. And I don't want to sort of, just make this a sort of recap sort of stream where I just discuss everything that happened, because I feel like we've all seen this unbelievable season one finale like hundreds and hundreds of times. But as I was rewatching this for the about the 100th time, like really kind of cool themes that are weaved in here, in and out throughout the course of this episode. So many just interesting talking points here. And again, with this sort of first theme of illegality and what is legal and what is not legal. And it's definitely a sort of very present theme over the course of this episode that not only affects Walter White, but is also intertwined in his entire family, including Skyler and Marie and Hank. And definitely was probably pretty damn intentional by the creators when this episode was written. What is up at Steven Canoff? Appreciate the analysis, sir. You do an excellent job with this amazing series. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the kind words there for sure. And yeah, like I said, I'm excited to talk about this one, man. There's some pretty interesting themes here that we get to kind of delve into. Some controversial stuff, not the sort of cookie cutter, boring, non-threatening, sort of advertiser-friendly content that a lot of these platforms like. But so be it. I'm actually really excited to talk about this episode through and through here. But yeah, so unbelievable opening scene where we see a continuation of the story that was displayed to us in the previous episode, where Hank and Steve Gomez discovered that the respirator that they found way out in the boonies on the Indian reservation originally came from J.P. Wynn High School, Walter White's high school. Of course, they have to go into the sort of chemistry equipment lab where Walter White presides over. He's the only one who really has a key to it. And of course, just via just poor policing, if you will, unfortunately, a innocent bystander in Mr. Archuleta, Hugo Archuleta, really gets done dirty here in these in this episode and the previous one, where because of Walt's decision to manufacture methamphetamine and his inability to cover his tracks properly, as Saul Goodman himself said, without me, Walter White would be dead and in prison, or in prison within a month. Absolutely right. Just making this very stupid decision to not cover up his tracks whatsoever and leave a almost paper trail, if you will, because they were able to trace the tag back to his high school. And of course, because Hank can't see any sin in his brother-in-law at all at this point in time, it's just incomprehensible that his brother-in-law would be this infamous Heisenberg that, of course, does not yet exist yet to Hank Schrader, because that pseudonym... no, that's the previous episode at Cinema Dave. That's previous, 2 episodes previous at Cinema Dave. That was Gray Matter, the Talking Pillow episode. But yeah, because of that, Hugo Archuleta gets really bung effed here through and through. And we kind of have a continuation here where the DEA is sort of at a PTA meeting, if you will, kind of assuaging all of the various parents at JP Wynn High School of their sort of fears and reservations, and the sort of almost the game of telephone where all these, blatant false accusations against this janitor are being thrown around about how he was selling drugs at the school, et cetera, et cetera. And then the conversation just ebbs and flows to all of these sort of crazy fears of, kids doing LSD at high school and stuff like that. And of course, as Principal Carmen stated, that he was arrested not for stealing the chemistry equipment, but only for having a small amount of marijuana in his car, and was not selling to the students or even using when he was at work, and he has since been fired. And of course, a lot of sort of themes going on here. Definitely a sort of theme about what is right and what is wrong. I don't want to get too bogged down in the sort of drug debate. There's definitely a literal debate that happens later in this episode between Hank and Walter White, which is pretty cool to see. But of course, when the sort of charges and the fears of someone breaking into the chemistry lab and stealing all of this equipment to manufacture methamphetamine is being discussed by the parents and the staff and the DEA, we can see Walter White getting suspiciously turned on clearly by all of this talk, where he is really reveling here in him being responsible for all of this. And it's truly a sort of, I don't know, almost being turned on by this sort of danger, or I don't even know, just sort of risk-taking or something to that effect. We definitely see that over the course of this episode, as well as the season 2 premiere, if I'm not mistaken, after he returns home from the deal with Tuco. But here we can, of course, see him getting rather revved up, if you will, with his wife Skylar, and of course being very sort of in the mood here and turned on at this PTA meeting at what is, in terms of polite society, probably not the most I would say, appropriate or polite place to engage in activity like this. And of course, the sort of added layer in all of this is that the sort of conversation of Walt being this sort of bad boy, if you will, for lack of a better term, and the sort of his crimes are clearly turning him on here in this scene. And Skylar clearly being in the mood as well. Kind of a funny scene here where they're interrupted by Carmen, who says, could you please give us a rundown of the equipment that was taken? Of course, at the same time, they give him a sitting ovation for returning and still being on staff despite him going through his chemotherapy treatment. And just a little side note here, as a fellow bald compatriot with Walter White, I have to say that this definitely is not realistic whatsoever. If you sort of look at the silent revolution, to each their own. That is, I see what you're getting at there. But if you ever see people who take chemotherapy, they definitely lose all of their hair. And I really feel like they lose like completely all of their hair, their eyebrows, their mustache, everything. But of course, we can see Walter White's sort of hair growing in right here. And this definitely sort of looks like maybe a 1 or 2 day growth, depending on how fast your hair grows from a straight cartridge razor shave, which he did in the previous episode. So yeah, of course, we can clearly say this show stinks because it's not realistic whatsoever, and Walter White shouldn't have any facial hair, and this was definitely an oversight. No, I'm just kidding. It's sort of nitpicking here, but I guess in this universe, chemotherapy patients sort of don't actually lose all their hair, and they just sort of shave it. But anyway, it's just sort of something I noticed as someone who also shaves their head. And if Walter White, if this person was actually going through chemotherapy, I really feel like he would have lost all of his hair. And he sort of just looks like a guy who's just shaving his head, as I do. At the Pattern Slice 900, what is up? I can't believe it's almost been 3 months since Better Call Saul ended. The Breaking Bad franchise is over. I'm glad you're still doing Breaking Bad content. I appreciate that, man. I definitely appreciate that for sure. And if we're being completely honest, I think I can maybe speak for a lot of fans of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. That again, I feel like I'm going to be saying it. I think everyone else is maybe thinking it in the back of their mind. Maybe a small percentage hopes that Vince Gilligan fails in his future endeavors in creating new television shows, and those are panned, and he eventually goes back to what has worked in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, so we get more iterations of this universe. I was sort of half joking there, but also sort of not joking there. Very selfishly, as a fan who wants to see more of this universe, thinks that would be pretty great. And it is kind of funny how he said I don't want to be a one-trick pony. I want to make other stuff. And how it's really hard to catch lightning in a bottle twice, let alone 3 times. But I don't know, man. I feel like this is an established franchise that a lot of people like, and the writing is impeccable, the storytelling is impeccable, the characters are impeccable. There's a loyal, fervent, rabid fan base. I feel like it'd be pretty easy to make a sort of, another iteration of that show, as opposed to, I feel like catching lightning in a bottle would be creating another universe completely on its own after you already created something this amazing. So, but again, maybe he wants to do that. Maybe he sort of is really up for that challenge at the Pattern Slice 9900. But yeah, appreciate you tuning in. And yeah, like I said, can never talk too much about this universe, that's for sure. Nick Russ, been a while. Anton, hope things are well. Anyway, this was a great episode in my opinion. Yeah, I've been doing great. I hope you've been doing well yourself. Yeah, like I said, I cannot complain. It's life is real life has kind of gotten in the way of me talking about the show, but I'm here and I'm up for it. So yeah, really appreciate everyone for tuning in. That is for sure. But yeah, so anyway, again, kind of getting back to what I was talking about here. But yeah, I kind of went off a little bit of a tangent about the hair. But as Walt is reading the equipment that he pilfered from the chemistry lab, this is then sort of overlaid and panned to a continuation of the I guess foreplay, if you will, that was happening at this PTA meeting to Skylar and Walt getting it on in the car. In the parking lot of J.P. Wynn High School after this PTA meeting. Again, let's try to find a shot here of this. It's going to be hard. Yeah, here we go. So the sort of scene of him of him reading the equipment that got taken, overlaid with him and Skylar, doing it here in the car of the parking lot of this high school, and of course after Walt finishes here, for lack of a better term. Skylar says, where did that come from and why was it so damn good? And of course, Walter White's response was because it was illegal. And again, this sort of very sort of interesting scene right here really sets up this sort of theme of sort of the blurred lines of legal and illegal that are sort of is the main theme of this episode, where it is true. I mean, I can pretty much, be fully self-assured that I'm pretty sure having publicly fornicating in a parking lot in a high school is illegal in a car. I'm pretty sure. So I'm pretty sure that's legal in all 50 states in the U.S. I can't speak for Canadian laws. Any Canadians out there? Maybe it's legal to do it in Canada. I'm not really sure, but I think that's what Walt was sort of getting at here, where you can't sort of openly sort of engage in these carnal liaisons in public, and that sort of created the excitement and the thrill of this encounter by this married couple here, and that's definitely a thing. I know the sort of thrill component of engaging in these engaging in sex is definitely can be a crucial part of someone's sex life, if you will, in terms of I guess if you're sort of with again, do I really want to go off on a tangent here? Basically, Walter White and Skylar, I guess the sort of thrill illegal aspect of this engagement that they had here in this parking lot is what made it so great, I suppose. I think that's what Walt was sort of getting at here. And as Hank Schrader would say a little bit later in this episode, sometimes forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest. So again, I don't know. I've never engaged in this activity in a public parking lot in a car after a PTA meeting with my pregnant wife, as Walter White and Skylar did here. So maybe this sort of thrill and the sort of dangerous nature of this encounter was pretty effing amazing for these two characters. And as sort of Hank Schrader said, despite some things being illegal, at the same time, because they are illegal, can make them be so tempting. I mean, even going back to like Genesis, right, with the one thing that Adam and Eve couldn't do in the Garden of Eden was the thing they wanted to do, the sort of forbidden fruit tasting the sweetest. If that is literally a sort of biblical sort of reference that Hank Schrader is making in this episode. And at the same time, again, sort of the theme here of, again, if, did they really hurt anyone? This is the sort of consenting adults sort of theme, I guess, were their windows tinted enough where they couldn't see any, and no one could see anything here in the dark. So again, this is sort of interesting sort of prelude for this episode to come, where we see the sort of blurred lines of good and evil, illegal, with Hank Schrader using the Cuban cigars, and with Marie shoplifting and her kleptomania, sort of juxtaposed with Walter White engaging as sort of next level of illegality with this manufacturing and distributing of methamphetamine. So that's kind of the theme that I saw here as I was rewatching this episode for the 100th time. I don't know what anyone else sort of thought of this opening scene, but that's sort of my sort of initial interpretation of all of this. Charlie Hennings, I like that. I definitely like that. Walt was definitely starting to test the illegal water, seeing how far he can push the envelope. Yeah, I mean, I definitely got that a little bit as well. In this, and again, with the sort of everything he does here, when he sort of talks back to Tuco, and when he engages in the stealing of the methylamine from Southwestern Aniline with thermite and that huge explosion. Again, I think a lot of it has to come from the fact that he has nothing to lose, as we've talked about in the previous, episodes, where he has this terminal lung cancer diagnosis. That really, what does he have to lose anyway? He's going to be dead in a matter of years. I mean, the progress of him. What's the word I'm looking for here? The possibility of him having a long life, irrespective of what action he takes here on Earth, is really has no bearing on how much longer he lives. So yeah, definitely there. That's a huge part of this for sure. Sort of, I guess now he's able to sort of dip his toe in these illegal waters, and part of this has to do with the fact that he has nothing to lose. So, at J Ladybug, they're just degenerates. Yeah, I guess that could be a more simple explanation to all of this as well, and a definite possible explanation. I like that. That may have been a much more simpler. They're degenerates. So let's move on. Yeah, kind of going back to that previous conversation, they'd have to recast for sure, especially with it probably being like a half decade at the least before they ever make any more iterations of this. But again, I've heard the sort of interesting possibilities as well of maybe creating sort of new characters within this same universe, where characters that already exist are discussed, but maybe sort of in the distance, where their sort of story that the audience knows is discussed by new characters that are younger, that are able to sort of enter this universe and be tertiarily related to characters we already know at Luke Cockburn. So yeah, that's an interesting sort of point as well. So yeah, I get maybe so at J Ladybug, maybe so. There's a reason why she really engaged in this activity here, and this sort of Ted Beneke aspect of all of that as well. But again, we know? I mean, I feel like she was kind of turned on and infatuated with Ted Beneke prior to her realizing that he was cooking the books with the sort of IRS tax felony tax evasion. But yeah, so kind of moving on here, we then sort of continue to the story of Walt and Jesse, following Jesse getting the absolute living shit beaten out of him by Tuco in the previous episode. We see that Jesse's selling his home. Of course, the camera initially pans to the basement of this home, where we see, again, it'll be hard for me to find the exact spot here. We see the pole that Crazy 8 was tied up to. We, of course, see the real estate agent sort of saying, like, imagine all the things you could do down here. Again, sort of juxtaposing the fact that this home kind of takes place in a nice, safe, quiet suburban neighborhood, and this is sort of who the house is being marketed to. With the fact that two drug manufacturers murdered and chopped up and chemically disincorporated two people in the basement of this home. So quite the juxtaposition that we as the audience know about when watching this. When watching this scene here, just imagine all the things you could do down here. So funny yet so dark. My goodness, one of the reasons why I love this show. Then again, of course, we see the another scene here as well. Just in case we didn't realize what was being referred to in the basement, just in case that was too subtle, we then sort of get the full money shot here of the sort of ceiling here being very unceremoniously replastered, or whatever you call this in the technical term for this is. But again, the real estate agent, again, being asked what happened here, her saying kind of a fixer, but this house has great bones. Of course, more and more sort of subtle allusions to Crazy 8 and Emilio. This is then followed by Walt entering the house and meeting with Jesse, sort of saying, I tried to visit you in the hospital, but you were passed out. Jesse taken aback by Walter White's Lex Luthor haircut. Then sort of getting to the sort of meat and bones of this scene here. Jesse saying, Skinny Pete, once he regained consciousness, told him that he said that you wanted Tuco's number, acting like you were all out for blood. But of course, Jesse thinking you're still alive, so I guess you wised up. Of course, Walt saying, no, I did see him. Jesse being totally taken aback by this. And then again, cutting to the chase here, Walt tells him that he worked out a deal with him to sell him £2 a week. Could you imagine just making $70,000 a week, for infinity? Can you just imagine just the unbelievable amount of money that is? Jesse, of course, saying, despite Walter White saying this will be no problem, we just need to scale up our hours, Jesse, of course, being much more well-versed in this world, tells him, how are we going to do this? You think the meth fairy is just going to bring us an unlimited supply of pseudoephedrine? And of course, because this is a legal over-the-counter substance that you can buy, but is a crucial, sort of the key, I guess, precursor, if you will, to manufacturing methamphetamine, there is a strict limit on the amount you can buy over the counter. And they also keep tabs on who's buying this, because if you're clearly buying this in copious quantities, it's probably not because you have a stuffy nose. It is because you want to manufacture methamphetamine. And Jesse, of course, being well versed in this world, telling him that it takes him weeks to get these pills, because as he says to him, he has Smurfs who smurf cold pills for him, who go to the drugstores, far away in different locations to sort of not draw suspicion, buying them a couple boxes at a time, and then accumulating them, and of course selling them to people who will manufacture methamphetamine, sort of having the third party, if you will, sort of being the middleman from the pharmacy to the drug manufacturer. And of course, we will see the sort of consequences of this play out later in this episode. And so yeah, this was sort of the meat and potatoes main plot that's occurring here in this episode. Great scene here completely, where we see Jesse Pinkman recovering from his busted ribs. And again, this is sort of a deal that Jesse Pinkman would have never made in a million years. But of course, because Walter White has nothing to lose at this point, and like I talked about in the previous stream, has no idea who the heck he is working with in Tuco Salamanca and what the Salamanca name means in Albuquerque, especially as it pertains to the Juarez Don Eladio cartel, he undertakes this deal, which, someone like Jesse Pinkman, who's well versed in this world, understands is pretty damn crazy. Okay, so then following this, we then cut to Dr. Del Cavoli and Walter White. Again, a sort of continuation of Walter White continuing his cancer treatment, meeting with his oncologist, and sort of cutting to the chase here, Skylar explaining to Dr. Del Cavoli that, Walt's doing pretty well. He's actually quite, sexually active. And has a lot of energy. This is probably a good thing, right? Despite the fact that he is getting chemotherapy treatment. And I mean, Skylar doesn't even know the half of it. I mean, he's trudging out to the, the Indian reservations to manufacture methamphetamine while undertaking this chemotherapy treatment as well. And Skylar, of course, also raises, despite everything going as well as it currently is, isn't there something more that we can do to even further, multiply the chances that Walt has a successful what's the word I'm looking for? Prognosis? Is that a word? In his cancer treatment. And she brings up, alternative Eastern medicine. Dr. Del Cavoli kind of saying he can't speak for the efficacy of it, but if it gives someone a positive outlook, then, it can't hurt. Again, sort of going back and forth here. In the grand scheme of things, again, with I really don't know much about Eastern medicine and everything like that in respect to sort of what other overt themes may have trying to have been written in here by the creators. But of course, Walter White, who is of course always scheming and manipulating here, despite the fact he's also trying to support his family, will eventually use this sort of prying is the wrong word, but more inquiring to Dr. Del Cavoli about this alternative medicine as a sort of opportunity here, and to be very opportunistic and use this as an alibi, as he'll later, when he wants to manufacture methamphetamine with Jesse Pinkman all weekend, he will lie to Skylar and say he's going to a sort of alternative, I guess technically Eastern medicine, sort of Indian sweat lodge, if you will. Again, in respect to the overall themes of this, of sort of, the psychology and Eastern medicine, I can't really speak to any of that. I am beyond not an expert in all of that, but it is kind of cool cool is maybe not the right word, but it is kind of interesting here to sort of see the gears turning and see the, despite Walt wanting to provide for his family, at the same time, he's sort of using this sort of, I guess, moment of vulnerability by Skylar as a opportunity to manipulate her. So quite the parallel and juxtaposition here in this scene. This is then followed by Walt and Jesse meeting with Tuco in the junkyard. This is very cool. This is the very first iteration ever of the pork pie Heisenberg hat persona that we see Walter White, I guess, utilize when he's sort of engaging in this alter ego of Heisenberg as he's undertaking this venture to manufacture and distribute methamphetamine in Albuquerque, New Mexico. What is up at Kate Valentine? Matt D. Epic. Yes, this episode is epic for sure. But yeah, pretty amazing scene here. And again, it's so true. I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but when Peter Gould said after watching Better Call Saul, you're going to see Breaking Bad in an entirely different light. I definitely sort of harken back to, again, I talked about it a little bit earlier as well, that speech that Saul Goodman made, where without me, Walter White would have been in prison or dead within a month. And it is kind of funny here, where they meet out here in this junkyard, and Jesse Pinkman is saying basically, what the hell are we doing the way out here? Why don't we go someplace public like the mall? This is sort of the idea a non-criminal has of a drug meeting way out here in the middle of this junkyard. It's something that you would maybe see on like Goodfellas or a sort of gangster mob movie or something to that effect. But of course, Jesse Pinkman basically saying, no one actually sort of engages in activity like this. Why don't we just meet in a public place or Taco Cabeza? That's where most of my drug deals went down, which he implied with Emilio. Of course, at the same time, as Tuco begins to roll up, we see the sort of fear and anxiety sort of overtake Jesse Pinkman because, what is up? Jake Payne, formerly Hugh Jassel. All right, I was gonna say I thought I recognized that icon, the photo there, the photo icon, but I was like, it's a different name. So, what is up at Hugh Jassel? Jake Payne, interesting name change there for sure. Wow, just seeing one of these live chatting things makes me long for Saul so much. I've yet to care enough about another show to really participate in one. Hope all is well with our boy Anton. Yeah, man, I would agree. I have yet to sort of fully engage in a sort of new show and really get into it. And I don't know if I've talked about this in the past, but even the reason why I even watched Better Call Saul was kind of or Breaking Bad, was even an accident. I was just at a point in my life where I was just able to watch a show like this. And it's kind of crazy just with the way my life is right now. If I was like a little bit younger, or I don't know, if Breaking Bad came out right now, I don't even know if I would have been able to even watch it. But it was kind of just like a happy accident that I even sort of got into the show. And yeah, to tell you the truth, I don't know. I just have yet to find that sort of new show that I really enjoy on sort of mainstream television. I don't know. I don't know. I just feel like I'm not the hugest fan of all like the new stuff that sort of mainstream Hollywood is putting out. I just feel like it's all kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's very, I don't know. It's very sterile. I just feel like they're all, I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's hard for me to sort of get into a sort of new universe. And again, I was really drawn to Breaking Bad. It wasn't like I just started watching it just because it was popular. I watched it because I liked it. And I don't know. At Jake Payne, formerly Hugh Jassel, I've yet to sort of find the new sort of show that's being created on television that sort of piques my interest in any capacity like this show. I have yet to find it. But yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So. At the Sound Revolution, you used to work in Hollywood. I bet you have a million stories right there. That is for sure. But it's definitely I don't even know how. I feel like there's like all the shows are kind of. I don't know. I feel like the mainstream shows. They're all kind of the same, if you will. I feel like there's just sort of just general themes that they all sort of adhere to and sort of have to adhere to now. And I don't know. I've yet to find that sort of great show. And I don't know, but the thing is, I know there's shows that are still going on that maybe started a while ago, but it's kind of crazy. I don't want to get too into this, but I definitely even noticed, you sort of notice the very sort of subtle sort of changes in even a show like Better Call Saul compared to how season 1 of Breaking Bad started, where, it's kind of crazy. Like, I was like thinking back to this, I feel like I can't dance around the subject matter, but I mean, it's kind of even the way the sort of the relationship of like Hank Schrader and Steve Gomez, the sort of the back and forth that they had as characters. I feel like you couldn't write that into a show nowadays with the sort of, requirements that are, sort of, maybe even like written down of stuff that you sort of can't, write and create in television shows these days. Where it's so true. Like a lot of the shows that I liked in the past, like I mean, the Office was hilarious. I mean, for a couple of seasons, it eventually jumped the shark. But I mean, even shows like The Office and Breaking Bad, a lot of the themes that are in that are in those shows, just they couldn't even be written today. It's kind of crazy, just with the way sort of the the type of shows that this industry wants to create. So, but anyway, I digress. But kind of getting into back into this episode here, like I talked about a little bit earlier, when Tuco's driving up, we see Jesse Pinkman absolutely overcome with fear because this man just beat the absolute living shit out of him in the previous episode. But of course, Walt is sort of stoic and steadfast, and like I said, with this terminal cancer diagnosis, has absolutely nothing to lose. So can't break cell phones in half in this age. Yeah, that is a great point at J Ladybug. I mean, that is so true. I mean, I've heard people talk about today, like, how do you even get away with a crime these days? And it's actually kind of funny. I was going back and rewatching the sort of Southwest and Annalyn scene here where there is that one sort of security footage. But yeah, you just feel like there are cameras everywhere. I mean, you feel like a big chemical storage place like that would have like Nest cameras and all these cameras everywhere, and wouldn't just be sort of one grainy what are the name of those cameras? Like circuit TV cameras with really terrible grainy footage that's in black and white where they couldn't distinguish these two characters at all. And yeah, I mean, the way your iPhone can just track every single one of your movements everywhere you go. Everyone has an iPhone. Yeah, pretty crazy for sure. How this, yeah, it's kind of crazy. I sort of like this show needs to be a period piece at J Ladybug. It sort of needed to take place between 2002 to 2010. 11, 12, depending on your reading of the license plate in El Camino. So that sort of decade between 2002 to 2012, with the sort of meat and potatoes of it sort of taking place in the pre-cell phone era. Yeah, that's definitely a huge component of this universe specifically. But yeah, again, like I said, steadfast, Walter White, with nothing to lose with the cancer diagnosis, compared to the young Jesse Pinkman with seemingly lots and lots to lose, being very sort of fearful of what is coming up the road here with Tuco. Pretty hilarious line when Tuco kind of says, why are we the hell out here? Did they close the mall or something? A direct call back to Jesse Pinkman's dialogue. Kind of Tuco saying, respect. Essay, I think is what he said. Sometimes you have to give it to get it. I'm sorry, I had to tune you up. Sort of saying, all right, let bygones be bygones. Not to mention the foreshadowing where, compared to the sort of beating that No Dose will get at the end of this episode, Tuco basically, kind of gave him the Fredo kiss, basically, in The Godfather, compared to, what he's going to do to No Dose at the end of this episode. Yeah, sometimes you got to rob to keep your riches. Absolutely, at J Ladybug, a callback to the previous episode. So yeah, that was a love tap, what Jesse Pinkman got compared to what No Dose will get at the end of this episode. And of course, when Tuco says break it out, Walt only brings out the half pound because, of course, they have production problems. Tuco basically saying, not my problem. I thought you were players. How is it my effing problem that you can't produce? You told me 2 pounds and now you waste my time with these chiclets. Basically saying, you're doing business like a couple little bitches. I'm only going to give you 17 and a half minus the half for wasting my time. Jesse kind of, understanding, all right, we'll take our licks here. We were in the wrong. Let's get out of here before this man kills us or beats the shit out of us. But of course, Walter White, nothing to lose, saying, I want all of it. The entire 70,000. You want this product and you like this product and you want more of it. Consider it a capital investment. Tuco basically kind of taken aback by the fact that this, old, bald mother effer, as he even says, is talking back to him. And basically, of course, after, contemplating it for a little bit, decides to loan Walter White this money with 25% interest. On the condition that he'll also be compensated for the meth that he owes him from last week. Basically saying, next week, 2 pounds, I'll loan you this money. And of course, Jesse thinking, all right, I guess we could technically make 2 pounds. That's theoretically possible. We're going to need a crap ton of cold pills, but it's theoretically maybe possible despite how difficult it is. And of course, just as Jesse thinks, all right, we somehow got out of this scot-free, Walt says, can you handle 4 pounds? And I mean, my goodness, the look on the face of Jesse Pinkman, as well as Tuco here again. I'll try to find the shot of Jesse. It'll be hard, but yeah, this sort of just, again, it'll be almost impossible to find the exact the exact frame here without, yeah, more. This is close enough. But yeah, just when Jesse thinking like 4 pounds. I mean, are you crazy? Like, who do you think we are? Scarface again. I'm sort of editorializing what Jesse Pinkman is probably thinking here and what he'll outright say in the next scene. But Tuco even saying, talk is talk, but owing me money, that's bad. And of course, Jesse Pinkman saying, what did you just do? Sort of saying that, are you effing crazy? This is physically impossible. We cannot create 4 pounds of methamphetamine, thus ending this unbelievable scene here in the junkyard. The very first iteration ever of Walter White as Heisenberg on screen here. So, well, I guess technically in the previous episode he said he was Heisenberg, but the sort of pork pie hat association with him sort of assuming this Heisenberg persona. This is really the sort of the first, I would say, like, first and a half time that he ever assumed this persona in this series. So, yeah, Charlie Henning's great point. Interesting to see how Walt controlled the business deal with Tuco without having a clue about this world. Exactly. Jesse having to explain what Tuco was saying to Walt. Exactly. He didn't know what he didn't know what Vig meant, how it was slang for interest, and yeah, again, a lot of it was Walt basically having nothing to lose. Like I talked about, it's just no fear. He's basically a dead man anyway. I mean, and he'll reiterate this in various speeches over the course of this show. All life comes with a death sentence. Until that day, who's in charge? Me. Also, what he says to Hank Schrader in respect to you go out there and you kick that bastard right in the teeth, metaphorically speaking. Whatever sort of fear that you're worried about. So yeah, definitely quite the irony there for sure, where the person with all the experience, as you said, and just sort of understood the sort of repartee, if you will, the sort of the rules, the unwritten rules that you sort of have to engage in during these deals, and Jesse completely playing by them, but of course Walter White just saying, I'm going balls to the wall here. I don't have time for this. I'm gonna be dead soon. I need money for my family. Let's make a deal. So yeah, quite the juxtaposition. At Rena Rocha, this part reminds me of the Ozarks. For some reason, the cartel member doesn't kill them for a reason. Again, I'll have to take your word for it. I've never seen Ozark, so J Ladybug. Because they are profitable assets to the business. Again, sorry, I don't know exactly what that's in reference to. Maybe I'm missing someone in the chat there. But yeah, this is kind of an interesting scene here, this sort of continuation of this, where Jesse says, what did you just do? And of course, the very next scene where this picks up is at Jesse Pinkman's house, where he's basically saying 4 pounds, as 2 pounds wasn't, bad enough. That's probably, 200-300 boxes of sinus pills. There are not that many Smurfs in the world. And again, it's kind of interesting where I know this was done because they sort of wanted to have the next continuation of this conversation happen at a new location. But again, in order to get back to this house, I imagine that they had to drive back to Jesse's house. And again, I didn't see Walter White's car there at the scene. I definitely think they came together in Jesse Pinkman's car. So again, I don't know how far Jesse Pinkman lives from this junkyard, but if it's quite a drive, I mean, I can only imagine Jesse was probably freaking the F out. I mean, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was just almost in sort of, a state of it's not anaphylactic shock, but just sort of a state of sort of shock that people can get sometimes, where he's like, what did you just do? And he finally sort of had the vibrato to confront Walter White when they got back to his home. And again, I imagine that when Walter White said, can you handle 4 pounds? He in his head knew that, because of the bottleneck and just the logistical nightmare of acquiring that many cold pills to create the pseudo cook inhibits us from making the large quantities of methamphetamine that I want to sell in order to get all this money. I, in my head, know about the P2P, right? P2P style cook that's used with methylamine as the catalyst instead of pseudoephedrine, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'm not an expert here. But again, you just wonder how long it took for him to, why he didn't tell Jesse this right away. And I imagine he knew this when he made that deal with Tuco, because that would be something there if he literally didn't even think about the sort of methylamine possibility and just thought, despite how difficult it is to get cold pills, will somehow manage to cook 4 pounds of meth for Tuco Salamanca. But yeah, I always kind of thought that was interesting about how, clearly it's kind of like, they're explaining this scene to the audience because we don't sort of know what's happening in between, and this is sort of the additional information we need. But again, it sort of doesn't make sense from a sort of like how a real life conversation would have went. I would imagine that Jesse would have demanded a lot of this information sort of in the car on the way back from this meet. But again, maybe he was sort of in a state of shock, and that's why it took so long for him to confront Walter White about this seemingly Kafkaesque nightmare that they had found themselves in. At least Jesse thought he found himself in. But yeah, so following this, of course, following Jesse's reservations, Walt then tells him about this P2P cook. We're not going to need pseudoephedrine. We're going to, again, I don't remember the exact dialogue, but we're basically going to use methylamine instead. And Jesse says, so you do have a plan, no pseudo. Yeah, Mr. White, yeah, science. A quote that basically has since become a meme since this show was originally created. And of course, Walt gives him this long shopping list of everything they need. Jesse basically saying, I can't pronounce half of this crap. What are we doing here? This is too hard. I give up. Kind of the MO for Jesse Pinkman. When things kind of get difficult, he kind of, wants to take the easy way out and just doesn't really want to confront the sort of difficult problems, emotional and otherwise, that he finds himself in. But that's kind of a discussion for a different video. And, he says, I'm skipping town. I'm moving to Oregon. But of course, when confronted by Walter White, him sort of giving him the pep talk here saying, today is the first day of the rest of your life, Jesse. But what kind of life will it be? Will it be a life of, oh, no, I'm too scared? Or, will you really sort of, grab the bull by the horns here and be a man? And basically Walt saying, we need this. We need these items, and you are the only person who can get them for us. And so again, I feel like that was more of just an instinct initial reaction to, I gotta leave town. We're screwed here. But of course, with Jesse probably thinking, that's a logistical nightmare in and of itself, and who's to say I'm even safe there? I guess we're kind of screwed here. Walt says, we can make £4 if I get everything on this list. I guess this is what I'm gonna do. And so that's basically what happens here in this scene. Sort of that's the sort of meat and potatoes plot that's happening here in this scene, which is then, of course, intertwined with this sort of subplot of legal, illegal that I talked about at the beginning of this stream, which is sort of the main sort of underlying theme here in this episode. But yeah, this then cuts to the baby shower, which they again was foreshadowed and alluded to at the doctor's office with Dr. Del Cavoli. And again, we see the sort of lightheartedness of all of this, and in hindsight, pretty damn sad in many respects because this is the sort of happy family that Holly White at one point of her in some alternate universe may have had, but of course because of the what's the word I'm looking for here? The sort of, in hindsight, very poor decisions by her father. This is a life that she will never have, where she will never even remember her father or father-in-law, because they will both be dead by the time that she has, any long-term memory storage. She was, 1 year old when they both passed away, so definitely no memory of either of her, father or uncle. And, in many ways, again, it's so crazy how, in the time, it's just sort of a lighthearted sort of, again, there is a sort of emotional aspect to this scene as well, where the sort of lightheartedness of Hank's dialogue and Marie's dialogue and Skylar's dialogue and Walter White's dialogue, Walter Jr.'s dialogue and actions here are intertwined with Walter White's dialogue. And again, in the moment, it's quite the sad scene here for sure, because, it's when Walt's kind of talking to his daughter here, it's sort of the 900 pound pink elephant in the room, 900-pound gorilla in the room, elephant in the room, where Walter White's prognosis here is that he's never gonna really see his daughter's never gonna know her father, and he's not gonna be able to see his daughter grow up. So the sort of the dialogue that Walter White says here in this family of whatever you do in your life, you have a family who loves you. In the moment, it was a sort of tough scene to watch, just based on the nature of the sort of life that Holly will have because her father is diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. But again, it's on steroids after everything that happens over the course of the next 2 years because of the decision making of her father, Walter White. So again, it's kind of crazy. The very first time I watch the scene, you think, oh, it's kind of quirky, and yeah, it is kind of sad. Like I see what they're doing here because it's kind of sad because of the sort of nature of Walter White's illness. But again, the sort of dark nature of this scene, in my opinion, is just on steroids here, following the entire story of Breaking Bad. So, at Luke Cockburn, Holly will be haunted by Walt's immortality for as long as she could remember. Sadly, yeah. Again, that would be something right there. And I know people have brought up the Holly White spinoff. I guess I guess you could do that. Taking place like Walter White's daughter. I mean, I guess it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't even want to pontificate on how any of that would materialize on screen because that is just absolute, just utter pie in the sky fan fiction at this point in time. But yeah, Holly's life will be something here for sure. And kind of again, we see the sort of the klepto. Before I get into sort of the legal illegal sort of kleptomania aspect of all this, this sort of kind of goes back to the point that again I forgot. Oh yeah, at Jay Ladybug made in respect to the fact that you can't break cell phones in half anymore. Trying to, yeah, kind of the, again, quite the, I got a real, I don't know about you, at Dread Electric for damn sure. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I don't know, like, after watching this for the 100th time, again, like Peter Gould said, I'm sound like a broken record here, seeing Breaking Bad in a new light. I don't know who can watch this scene and not get some serious Lalo Salamanca vibes. I'm surprised someone hasn't already made a meme of this or something where they took the scene of Lalo vlogging and they put it next to Walter Jr., doing basically the same thing, using this sort of handheld camera, which is just, basically a relic that needs to belong in a museum because, I mean, so impractical compared to the fact that everyone has a video camera on their cell phone in their pockets. So yeah, kind of a funny point here where we have to remember this takes place in 2008, and not only did, video cell phones not really exist at this point in time, they were basically just flip phones. And so, yeah, and I think, I don't even remember when videos really came on the cell phones, maybe around the 2010, a little bit of the turn of the 2010 decade. And I remember I don't remember if anyone else remembers, but the footage was so terrible and grainy. I mean, the cameras stunk on those phones. But yeah, it is kind of crazy how everyone now in 2022 would probably have their cell phone out right now and be filming this and, posting this to social media and everything of that effect. But it is kind of funny how we have to remember this is a period piece, and we need if you want to record this moment, you have to use a video camera, and a lot harder to share than when we had the fact that you can just basically share these files on the internet now, and social media wasn't as big as it is now back then. So just kind of just sort of a side note that I couldn't find myself not thinking about as I was rewatching this episode. But yeah, here again, not wanting to get bogged down completely here, but we then, yeah, way back in 2008. I mean, what is that, like 14 years ago? I mean, yeah, that's quite a while. So, I mean, almost a decade and a half. I mean, time flies at Kate Valentine. Time sure does fly. That is an understatement. But kind of a cool scene here, and we kind of get back in the sort of illegal theme here, and I think this was absolutely intentional the way this was written to this episode specifically, where Walter White's illegal actions of manufacturing methamphetamine are juxtaposed with Marie's shoplifting, likely as a result of her kleptomania, in addition to Hank doing something that in 2008 was technically illegal, I guess, smoking Cuban cigars, which we see later in the scene. And of course, we see during the gift opening of the baby shower that Skylar is gifted with a white gold tiara. Of course, at the time, we don't know this was stolen, but with the benefit of hindsight, we can kind of just interpret Hank Schrader's reaction to this as him knowing that his wife has a problem with kleptomania or kleptomaniacy. What's that word? She's a kleptomaniac, and his wife has a problem with that. But of course, he's not going to throw his wife under the bus here. And again, a very sort of interesting scene here that really made me think. Where as Hank Schrader was going through this scene, he's and having to watch all of this and really just not being able to stand any more of this, he says, hey, listen, Walt, do you have anything stronger than beer? And of course, oh, why did I just play that? And then Walt's kind of saying, do you have, I really need to sort of take the edge off here. I'm I can't stand any more of this. And so, they go in the backyard, they sort of, drink the expensive hooch here as opposed to the beer. And while they're drinking, Hank says, I know the best thing that would go with this, him taking out a cigar, but of course him saying, I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. You have lung cancer, but Walt kind of saying, can I have one of those? Despite Hank's reservation saying, how much sicker can I be? I already have lung cancer. But anyway, with that kind of being the setup here, we kind of get to the sort of meat and potatoes theme of the scene where Walt says to Hank, Cubans, I was under the impression that these were illegal. And Hank, of course, saying, sometimes forbidden fruit tastes the sweetest. I did a favor for an FBI guy a while back, and he kind of gifted me these Cuban cigars. And of course, Walt sort of brings up the money shot here in respect to the arbitrariness by which we classify drugs. And again, it sort of hits home even closer to Hank because he works for the Drug Enforcement Administration. And Walt kind of saying, it's arbitrary. What's legal, what's illegal. How technically Cuban cigars are illegal. And they're classified that way, but at the same time, us using them, not a big deal. I mean, are they going to throw you in prison for smoking a Cuban cigar? Definitely no, most certainly no. But him kind of saying it's arbitrary. But at the same time, a drug like, marijuana, which Walt was claiming to use in the previous episode, is a Schedule 1 narcotic, which you absolutely could theoretically get thrown in jail for smoking in public back in 2008, especially in front of a DEA agents. And Walt saying it's arbitrary and how, even theoretically, if we were consuming alcohol during Prohibition, we'd also be breaking the law. But we kind of understand that law was kind of ridiculous. And, of course, just the way our society accepts certain drugs like alcohol and tobacco much more than it accepts drugs like Schedule 1 narcotics like marijuana or Schedule 2 controlled substances like amphetamines. And of course, Hank is thinking that he's seeing through what Walt is trying to get at here with him saying, like what? Like what else should be legal? Like pot? Because of course, in the previous episodes, Walter White had used him using marijuana as an alibi to explain his irrational behavior, as he said himself, which is probably better than telling his wife the truth that he cooked crystal meth and now has killed 2 men. But of course, Hank and Walt then sort of have a back and forth here about how, Hank's saying, all right, you say marijuana should be legal. Again, kind of a ridiculous argument here. I don't know. It's actually quite thought-provoking in many respects, and I feel like a lot of people have a lot of different opinions on it, but Hank basically saying, what else should be legal? Heroin, cocaine, basically should we legalize all drugs? And Walt kind of saying it's arbitrary, and it absolutely is. And again, it's sort of the whole sort of grand, I guess, discussion in respect to drug legalization. And again, there's no right answer to any of this. I mean, the current sort of state that we are in with the current war on drugs is clearly not working. I mean, despite the fact that these drugs are illegal, I mean, I feel like, people are still abusing drugs at unbelievable rates. The violence associated with, I guess, the cartel, which is a central theme in this show, is still going on to this day. And I mean, despite the fact that drugs like, despite the fact of our current drug policy, I mean, people are, I don't know, maybe it's, tapered off a little bit, but I feel like opioid deaths, at least for in the previous couple of years, were just growing and growing and growing, people using these narcotics. And again, I wish I had the answer to all of this. I feel like in a perfect world, all of these drugs would be legal, but no one would use them. Something along the lines of that, where yes, how, throwing people in jail who are basically in prison and sending them on long prison sentences just because they're addicts probably isn't the best. But at the same time, as a society, do we want to legalize all of these drugs despite them being incredibly detrimental? And again, it's kind of like, I feel like people kind of want to have their cake and eat it too. I feel like with the current state right now, I mean, as we see in Breaking Bad, these gangs will butcher each other for the right to sell these narcotics on the streets. I mean, we see it in Breaking Bad. And if you legalized those and sold them legally by and was regulated by the government, would that decrease the sort of homicide rate associated with drug manufacturing and distribution? Yes, probably. But at the same time, would you have higher rates of overdose and death because more people would use these drugs? Probably yes as well. So I feel like, you really can't have your cake and eat it too here. Where is that better? I don't know. Is it better to not have the sort of the shooting violence in the streets that we see in Breaking Bad in respect to our drug policy, and have more people using these drugs and getting addicted to them because they are incredibly addictive and overdosing on them, which they will inevitably do? Like I said, I wish I had the answer, and if anyone out there has the answer, there is a Nobel Peace Prize with your name on it waiting for you. So yeah, like I said, it's a very nuanced discussion here with all of this. What is up at Stoned Yoda? Quite the name there. Quite the serendipitous name there for this discussion. That is for sure. At Luke Cockborn, the morality and legality of drugs is very complicated. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. There is no clear-cut answer to any of this. I feel like we would have done it already if there was. At Debza Kormos, Hiya Anton, sunglasses emoji, just passing by, LOL. Not sure what that emoji is. Heart something emoji. Appreciate you for passing in, that is for sure. But yeah, kind of interesting. And again, a little bit, in addition to the sort of extremely complicated no right or wrong answer in the sort of drug discussion here, we also sort of see Hank Schrader kind of say, you sound like all the guys in lockup. Like, what are you busting me with these, 10 bales of ganja for? It's all going to be legal in a few years when Willie Nelson is president. And again, Hank is being very dismissive here in the year 2008. But what's actually quite ironic is marijuana, I believe, I don't know, someone can correct me on this. I know in Canada, isn't it legal completely in Canada now for recreational use in the entire country, if I'm not mistaken? And in the U.S., it's legal in many, many states. I mean, it is kind of crazy how these days, it's still a Schedule 1 controlled substance in the United States. That's the way it's classified, how it's classified as more dangerous than amphetamines, because I believe like drugs like Adderall or you can get those in a prescription, so that's why I think Schedule 2 means you only can get them via prescription, and Schedule 1 means they're illegal completely, and you cannot get them via prescription, which I guess technically is worse because we say, well, these are legal for people who need them for medical purposes, and we're kind of saying Schedule 1 has no medical purposes. I think that's kind of what they're getting at there, and it's pretty damn ironic how, I guess, even to this day, marijuana is still a Schedule 1 controlled substance in the United States. So yeah, it is what it is. So, I mean, I feel like that was kind of dismissive, to tell you the truth. I feel like it is what it is for people who are probably locked up in prison right now for just being users, and not even people who are, we're selling or distributing, putting people who are addicts in jail, which I think we kind of do. Again, I really probably shouldn't be touching any of that with a 20-foot pole, but yeah, it's a lot of sort of food for thought here for sure. At Rusty Shackelford, being addicted to a drug is prison in itself. The government punishing people who are already in hell isn't the answer. I think there needs to be more of drug counseling. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of efficacy to that, but I feel like, states and the government aren't funding that. I feel like it's really expensive to give people that kind of treatment, I feel, Rusty Shackelford. I feel like we're not investing in that as a country and as a society. And yeah, for it is what it is. Unfortunately, again, I keep saying it is what it is, but to people who are in prison right now for that, it's kind of effed up, to tell you the truth. But again, I feel like a little bit like hopeless here. Like, what can I do? I'm just some guy who's rambling on the internet right now. How can I change the world? It's kind of unfortunate. So. At Commerce, it is illegal. It is completely legal in Canada. All right. I don't think it was in 2008. So Hank. I mean, he's a little bit biased here, being a federal agent for the DEA. But yeah. So I mean, he passed away before he saw it. I imagine, because he died in 2010. Hank Schrader's character. But yeah, his it will become much more legal despite his dismissive attitude here in this scene. So. What is up at Justin Cruz as well? At Colin McGregor, what is up, man? Yeah, at Stone Yoda, yeah, that's kind of this sort of underlying issue in all of this where, like I talked about, in a perfect world, you would say all drugs are legal, but no one would do them. And again, it is kind of true where I feel like you kind of have to go back to the root of it all about why are people using these drugs in the first place. And again, a lot of it is, I guess, a lot of it is probably sort of self-medication. It is a lot of it, I think, is sort of emotional coping because life can be pretty brutal sometimes for lots of people, and it's a form of escapism. I imagine, and it is again. They talk about it here in the scene how you can basically use as much alcohol as you want. You can go out in the store and buy as much alcohol as you can legally afford with the money that you have. There's really no cap or limit on it whatsoever. And it's completely socially acceptable. You can use alcohol as a coping mechanism for your emotional distress, which, sadly lots of people do. And I feel like that's why you would use any drug, I suppose. That's why you're maybe using, cocaine or, any other sort of schedule or classified drug. Maybe it's experimentation or wanting a sort of, a certain effect or feeling. And of course, but the thing is, with a lot of these drugs, my goodness, are they addictive. So it's kind of, that's the huge problem in all of this, where it really becomes like a stranglehold, I would imagine, when you're addicted to some of these really addictive drugs, including cigarettes, which, as the great George Harrison said, all drugs kill you, just some do them more quickly than others. And that's, again, that was pretty profound when I heard George Harrison say that. It's kind of true, alcohol, tobacco, maybe not marijuana, but at least based on the science of that, but all drugs in air quotes, it's true, they're all destructive. It's just some drugs like opioids will get you really quick. It's much easier to overdose on those at a very young age as opposed to something like cigarettes, which will take a little bit longer to eventually kill you, but they're all not good for you. And again, I feel like a lot of it is individualized. I feel at the same time at Stone Yoda, I can't explain why every single person chooses to use a substance which I feel like most people knows is bad for them. I feel like there's no person on this planet who's using cocaine who's not thinking, I really have no idea how terrible this is for me. Maybe they don't realize how addictive it is until they actually use it. I don't know if people have heard the accounts of the comedian Richard Pryor and his sort of crack addiction, where it was literally like just a complete just stranglehold on you. It was just something that could not release its grips from you. So yeah, that the whole freebasing thing. So yeah, I am no expert in any of this, but again, it is kind of interesting conversation. It really is, and they're having it right here for sure. The sort of the back and forth here between Walt and Hank, and of course the sort of capper on this entire conversation in and of itself is the fact that, not only, are some things that are illegal that should be legal, but there were things that were legal that shouldn't have been, like how meth used to be legal and how they sold it over the counter at drugstores. And they said, good thing they sort of came to their senses on that one. Of course, the grand irony being Walter White is manufacturing methamphetamine under the nose of his brother-in-law. But at the same time, isn't Adderall just an amphetamine, if I'm not mistaken? Again, I've never taken a sort of a drug that wasn't prescribed to me, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that's why it's Schedule 2. I'm pretty sure we give people amphetamines if you're prescribed Adderall. I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that's kind of the sort of grand irony in all of this. And again, I don't know the chemical difference or the effect difference of Adderall compared to methamphetamine, but yeah, it's a lot of food for thought. So yeah, it's Stone Yoda. I think that's why it's Schedule 2. I think Schedule 2 controlled substances are drugs that are legal only via prescription, but are illegal without a prescription. And ironically, yeah, I guess, Walter White is manufacturing a Schedule 2 controlled substance, but if he was growing weed in his backyard, I guess he would be manufacturing a Schedule 1, which is the grand irony in all of this, so. Yeah, Debs at Cormos. If you're referring to George Harrison, yeah, I agree for sure. So yeah, following this, we then see a continuation of the baby shower, where Skylar just completely taken aback by the fact that her sister-in-law, or not her sister-in-law, her sister Marie gave her a white gold tiara, baby tiara, which probably cost $500-600. We need something more practical, like a diaper genie. I'm going to return it. that's kind of, the background sort of scene happening here in this scene. But of course, at the same time, the sort of grand irony in all of this is that despite Walter White claiming to really care and want to provide for his family, he's at the same time really manipulating his family in many respects because he's lying to them. Maybe, again, he's twisting it to, he's twisting this sort of lie and justifying it, and, the ends justifying the means, I suppose. But basically saying, despite the fact that, I don't really believe in the efficacy scientifically of these Indian sweat lodges being good for your lungs. There's absolutely no scientific evidence for any of this. Could be an experience. They say it's good for your lungs, could put me in a positive outlook. I'll go to the sweat lodge. Skylar's saying, you at a sweat lodge. I can't even believe it. But, Walt kind of saying, I'll head out on Friday, come back on Sunday. And that's the sort of grand irony in all of this. This is a brief moment of marital bliss, but it's completely built and concocted on a lie. And once this sort of lie comes to light, it's going to completely obliterate and destroy his entire family. So quite this sort of juxtaposition here in this scene. So yeah, Kate Valentine, I agree. We're definitely going down the rabbit hole there in terms of the drug legalization discussion. That is for sure. So Anton, you should try Ozark next. Again, I've heard good things about that show for sure. I saw a lot of people saying they didn't like the last season. It's like Breaking Bad and Shameless had a baby. First season and a half are good, then it goes to crap, but worth the watch. Yeah. I've seen that. I've seen that analysis. Yeah, I've seen that analysis of Ozark, and I've heard good things about Shameless too. Isn't Shameless a comedy? I think Shameless is a comedy, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I've heard good things about both of those shows. Haven't seen either of them, but yeah, definitely intriguing. Walt not paying attention. Walt was not paying attention to what kind of Scholar was saying. If that's what you're kind of getting at Justin Cruz, he was kind of an autopilot. I kind of imagine he was sort of more focused on, getting pumped up to tell his wife about this lie. The ending of Ozark was terrible. At Stone Yoda. Now for something completely new, Kate Valentine. I see what you did there. I'm doing good at Sam Fisher. Done with midterms. Ended last week. Glad to hear. Glad to hear for sure. You must be on one of those schedules. I know some schools get her out around Thanksgiving. So you damn, if you're already done, you're done really early. That's badass. So that's cool. Dramedy at Shameless. All right, at Stone Yoda. Okay, cool. Appreciate that. So it's like a dramedy. All right. So I imagine this kind of starts out lighthearted, and then sort of probably gets like more sort of in depth, and the plot becomes much more serious, and the characters become more developed and stuff of that nature. Just assuming, but maybe I shouldn't assume. Ooh, but anyway, here. So following this really cool juxtaposition to following this lie that Walt tells Skyler, he then shows up at Jesse Pinkman's house, and Jesse says to him, "Sweat lodge." And Walt kind of goes, "Yep, I told her the alibi." And he's like, "All right, I'm already sweating. Help me out here." So we see that Jesse went along with the plan. He got all of the equipment that they need to manufacture the 4 pounds of methamphetamine via the P2P style cook using methylamine as a precursor. But of course, it's then revealed to us that Walt says, "All right, we got everything, but where's the methylamine?" And of course, Jesse says, "I could buy everything you said on this list, except this methylamine that you talk about, where they got this locked up." And again, I don't know if this is actually the case, but it definitely appears to be the case where they keep close tabs on pseudoephedrine as well as methylamine, because both of these things are precursors to creating Schedule 2 controlled substances. So you kind of have to lock away the sort of key catalyst to making all of this. At Kate Valentine, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much, Anton. If you're saying thank you for talking about this show, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kate Valentine, for the continued support of this channel. Major thank you for sure at Kate Valentine. Thank you so much for the support. It really does mean a lot. It does. It means a lot that people like to. Again, I'm still kind of taken aback that people like to like to hear me talk about this show. But yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Kate Valentine. Can't express it enough. Thank you so much. But yeah, kind of getting back into it here. continuing with this, like I talked about, it really seems that like I said, methylamine and pseudoephedrine are the precursors, which are regulated and you can't just buy over the counter. At Michael Curtis, ain't caught alive in a minute. Glad you're doing these. How you living, Anton? Like I said, I'm doing great. I am a free American, so I'm probably one of the luckiest people on this planet in the grand scheme of things. I'm doing well myself. Shout out to all of my Canadian people as well. Have I ever been to Canada? Maybe just passing through. I think I was kind of younger when I went there, but I'm doing great. Say what you will about the greatest country on earth, but I'm doing great, Michael Curtis. Appreciate you for tuning in, and I can't complain. Like I said, it's been like you said it's been a minute since you caught one of these live. It's been a minute since I've talked about this show. Real life is like I said, I got a real life as well. I'm not someone who is just I can't be devoted to this 100% of my time just based on the nature of my life. But yeah, I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well yourself. Canada's cool. Yeah, I mean, I've never really been, to tell you the truth. I only went there when I was younger, and I don't really have a sort of adult experience with Canada, so I can't really speak on it. At Justin Cruz, shout out to all of the Canadian viewers out there. I know there's a lot of them on this channel, and I definitely appreciate it. And one day I need to visit your country as an adult. But it's a huge country. I don't know where I'd go. I mean, there's Toronto, there's Montreal, there's Nova Scotia. I mean, there's Winnipeg, Vancouver. Victoria, British Columbia. Edmonton. Ottawa, Calgary. I don't even know where I'd go in Canada. So I'm not too sure. But it's one day I'll definitely have to visit for sure. Appreciate it, Michael Curtis. Have a great night. Appreciate you for tuning in. At Stone Yoda, I love how Walt just assumes they'll good pounds of meth in Jesse's house. Yeah, there definitely is a lot of assumption by Walter White. I mean, it is kind of true, his naivete of even how when he promised Tuco the 2 pounds of pseudo meth, where in his head he's to cook. How they just assumes they'll cook. Yeah. Initially, all the way back in the pilot, how he just assumed they would cook there. Yeah. And as Jesse Pinkman says, I don't crap where I eat. If you want to smoke it up, let's smoke it up at your house. And the sort of look that Walt gave Jesse, he's like, yeah, I didn't think so. Yeah, definitely kind of that was a funny scene there for sure. How he just assumed they would cook there. And it is kind of crazy. I mean, say what you will about Jesse Pinkman, but that was kind of a brilliant idea where, and again, it's a brilliant sort of concept that I think the creators created when they created the show where, if you want the sort of rolling meth lab where you can go way out in the boonies and you can just be way out, all evasive in the middle of nowhere, kind of make it look like you're camping. There's all this sort of untapped land that really isn't, I guess they're Indian reservations, but I feel like there are not a lot of people out there. But yeah, it is kind of genius where we go out in the boonies and we make this stuff. But of course, the grand irony here is in this scene, they do make it in the basement, and it is the one time I believe that they cook meth in the basement here. They also make ricin in Jesse's basement in the season 2 premiere, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. So. Des at Debsacamos, thanks Anton for the Canada shout out. Country's beautiful, trust us. Yeah, we'll do it definitely. I don't know too much about it. Maybe that's just my American ignorance, but like I said, I've never really been there as an adult, so I can't really speak on it. But yeah, kind of seems like an interesting place, that is for sure. But kind of continuing here. Basically, Jesse saying, despite the fact we can't buy the methylamine, he pronounces it methylamine. I did find some guys that will rip it off for us, but they want 10 grand because they keep it at this chemical supply place, kind of way out of town. They got guards, they got alarms. They're gonna rip it off for us. And of course, when they want 10 grand, and Walt's saying, all right, we'll pay him. He's like, you got the money. He's like, no, I spent nearly the entire wad. All this stuff was expensive. And Walt, the wheels are kind of turning here. The gears are kind of turning. And Walt's like, well, why don't we just steal it ourselves? And Jesse basically saying, yeah, how are we going to do that? And he says, with this, and again, is this an Etch-a-Sketch, if I'm not mistaken? Is this supposed to be an Etch-a-Sketch? I'm not really 100% sure the sort of green thing. I never really found out what it was. I think I'm not exactly sure what this stuff is that has thermite in it. I probably could look it up online. But was never really sure what had this thermite. but I guess it's an Etch-a-Sketch at Sam Fisher. I think that's what it's supposed to be. But in the next scene, I guess, they went out in the store and bought tons and tons of them and got the thermite from them. And of course, Jesse basically saying, what is this stuff again? Again, very conveniently, sort of Jesse asking Walt for the audience so he can explain to us what thermite is. It's a sort of, I guess, heat activated. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not is it an explosive, or it's sort of rapidly releasing of energy when it's heat activated, something to that effect. Some science expert can quote me on this. And then of course Walter White goes into the sort of the World War II sort of a German Gustav gun, which I believe, again, he talks about this being this huge gun that the Germans used during World War II that could shoot an enormous shell, from miles and miles away. Corrosive, that might have been it at Rusty Shackelford. I don't know what the technical definition of thermite is. I guess I could look it up, but I don't know. I feel like I'll look it up at another time. But he then goes on to talk about the Gustav gun. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was used in the Sevastopol campaign when the Germans were invading Russia and when they were like firing rounds into Sevastopol, Ukraine. Is that in Ukraine? I may be really ignorant. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, but basically him saying like, it was this thick gun with all of this sort of metal in it, and you could, draw bombs on it and never disable it. Again, I don't know the entire sort of, if they're taking any historical sort of lenience or license here with the history of it. I'm not a history expert. Definitely shout out to Mark Felton, a great World War II historian, if anyone's interested in that. Non-political historian who makes World War II content on YouTube. Super popular channel, really interesting stuff. You can really kind of go down the rabbit hole there. It is kind of interesting, the whole kind of World War II thing. It's kind of intertwined here with this Breaking Bad episode, but definitely recommend you check that out if you're into that. But basically saying, it's this huge gun. Again, from what I've heard, I think I even watched an episode where he talked about it. I think it was super impractical because, it was really... It took a long time to set up and to load and to fire, and it wasn't practical whatsoever, a huge sort of gun like this, and how the Germans were kind of like obsessed with this concept of like gigantism and weapons, and it really wasn't practical, and it's much more practical to have a much smaller, more, practical, weapon that you can use and it can maneuver. It wasn't practical, but long story long, apparently you could disable this gun with this thermite because, you could drop bombs on it all day, but this stuff can basically eat through metal, and so, if this can eat through a huge gun which can fire rounds into a country from miles away, this can eat through a lock at a chemical supply storage facility. That's kind of the very long, a bastardization of history that I think Walter White was getting at here, that I was trying to explain not well whatsoever. Yeah, the Death Star. There you go. That could have worked as well. He could have literally said, "You remember the Death Star? It's basically the same thing." Like Family Guy made fun of. You shoot the laser through the little hole and the whole thing blows up. So, what is thermite made of? I think it's a chemical compound. Is that right? Again, I could be totally wrong there. Is it nat? I guess I don't know if it's an element. I really needed to pay better attention in high school. Is thermite on the periodic table of elements? I'm not even sure. Someone who paid attention in high school can quote me on that, but. Yeah, that is a great scene there where he throws the bag at him for sure. That is a great scene. And yeah, as Walt says, I think it will cut through any lock we're likely to find. So, kind of setting up the unbelievable robbery scene that happens at Southwest and Anilin later in this episode. And of course, following this, we then see the continuation of the Marie and Skylar storyline, where she attempts to return this white gold tiara to Zachary's. And again, of course, long story long, she finds out that someone shoplifted this white gold tiara, and the manager of the store wants to press charges. Of course, Skylar knows and is clearly putting two and two together that Marie was the one who shoplifted it. And of course, her basically saying like, "I didn't steal it. You have no evidence of it of me. This was a gift," and him basically saying, who gave it to you, and of course her not wanting to sell out her own sister. And at the same time, the store manager here is basically saying, "I'm going to press charges," and of course Skylar basically saying, "Yeah, well, I can go to the local news and tell them you held a pregnant woman against her will without her consent in this dank, dusty storeroom. Of course, a hilarious line when he says, "This is my office." Skylar then sort of feigns a sort of panic attack coinciding with going into labor. And when all is said and done, it probably is not really worth it in the grand scheme of things, the pressing charges against this pregnant woman, where it is sort of true, where I guess, they kind of cut their losses here, where, theoretically, Skylar could plead ignorance here and kind of say, they held me against my will, and it wouldn't be very good sort of publicity or press for the store if this ended up on the local news. So in the grand scheme of things, they got back the merchandise that was stolen. They're letting this person go. They're kind of cutting their losses. It's kind of a victimless crime. That's sort of the way the scene is summed up here. Pretty hilarious sort of acting here, literally by Skylar in the scene. She then kind of gets out of the situation. Quite the scene here for sure. The sort of fading the panic attack and not getting the charges pressed against her. This is, of course, then followed by her sort of calling Marie and saying, "We need to talk immediately." But quite the scene here, and the sort of the subplot, the sort of B story, if you will, that's happening over the course of this season 1 finale here. Again, at Sam, I don't know if it was out of place at Sam Fisher. It kind of goes to that sort of overarching theme that I talked about in this stream of sort of illegality and sort of the gray area and the arbitrariness of it. And this is sort of the very first iteration of Marie's kleptomania and her stealing fixation, which will, of course, take place over the course of the entirety of Breaking Bad, which will also end up getting her in therapy. So, again, yeah, I don't find it out of place. It was kind of just a development, a character development sort of plot that was happening and was providing more depth to Marie Schrader, and was also juxtaposing her illegal actions of shoplifting to Walter White's legal actions, which also go with fornicating in public in the parking lot of a high school and smoking Cuban cigars. So a lot of sort of interesting themes here for sure. Justin Cruz, I agree. What a good performance! That was quite the performance. She was quite the actor there. She was quite the actor for sure. I guess technically, I don't know. I don't know if that would be technically yeah, maybe it's a felony. I don't know at Sam Fisher. I don't know what the sort of legality of smoking Cuban cigars in 2008 was. It was sort of one of those things that was like technically illegal, but no one was going to bust you for it. It was kind of like a weird sort of gray area. So, theoretically, if you got caught at the airport importing like thousands and thousands of them, you probably would have gotten in trouble. But just having a few on your person, yeah, you're not going to get jammed up for that for sure. So. But then following this, the sort of illegal actions of Marie are then juxtaposed with even more illegal actions here in this episode, where Walt and Jesse rob the chemical supply facility at Southwest and Anlin. And my goodness gracious, do I love this scene. I don't know about you guys, but again, like I said, I've probably seen this episode like 24 times, but I've probably just gone back and watched this scene even more than that. This is such a great scene. Through and through. Yeah, great call to season 2 of Breaking Bad at Stone Yodo, that is for sure. But yeah, great scene here where they rip off this methylamine. There's basically everything you could ever want. There's drama, there's tension, there's comedy. It's just an unbelievably well-written scene. It's hilarious. It's got an explosion when they blow out the lock. This is great. This everything you could want and more from a Breaking Bad scene, especially in season 1 when the show was just starting. This might be one of my favorite scenes in this entire series. I love this scene here. Absolutely hilarious, but kind of crazy where, again, we get a call back to these masks the very first time that we ever see them. My goodness, in hindsight, these are, I guess, they're technically not Better Call Saul Easter eggs, but again, how we sort of view this scene, how can you not sort of think about the Walter White and Jesse Pinkman appearance in season 6 of Better Call Saul, when, the sort of scene that took place in the timeline during Better Call Saul in season 2 of Breaking Bad, where we see Walt and Jesse wearing these masks as they wore when they kidnapped Saul. And yeah, great mask for sure. And as Jesse said, this is all they have. You're in the wrong place. You go to a different store. But pretty hilarious scene here where we see these 2 masks. And yeah, Again, it really not a great idea for Walt to buy these masks. Just as kind of a side note, I feel like they're way too distinguishable. And luckily for them, they own this place. As we learned from the next season, it has a very grainy, black and white closed circuit, sort of a camera footage, and they can't sort of see the colors in these masks. But I really feel like, and not to mention they have these sort of like, I don't know if you what you call them, like palms at the top of them. So I really feel like with like modern cameras where you could see these masks, I really feel like you could trace these masks to like where someone bought them, which is definitely something they do. I don't know if you've ever seen like America's Most Wanted, but that's definitely something they do when they try to catch these criminals, where they sort of, look at the things they're wearing, and then they go to like, where these could have been bought at local stores nearby where the crimes were committed and stuff like that. But yeah, kind of just a kind of a little bit of a tangent here. But yeah, like I said, unbelievable scene, everything and more. Comedy, explosions, drama, tension. They're about to sort of go to the place where they store the methylamine, but of course, there's a wrinkle in the plan because the guard comes back even though he's not supposed to. But yeah, the guy was taking a crap and they tied him up. Basically, yeah, basically saying he's going to the crapper again. And it's pretty hilarious here where they had a plan, with the benefit of hindsight, it's kind of crazy to sort of just juxtapose this plan to Dead Freight when they rob off the train for the methylamine, where, again, like I've talked about in the past, they probably went through, like Walt and Mike and Jesse and Todd and Kubi, they probably went through that plan again and again and again. They practiced and knew it like the back of their hand. Of course, the sort of randomness of Drew Sharp they couldn't prepare for. But to juxtapose it with this right here, where they say like, why is the guard coming back? He's not supposed to come back. And of course, Jesse makes this very impromptu decision to be opportunistic and tie him up in the porta potty, and Walt kind of saying, what are you doing? Where are you going? Not being in charge of the situation here, kind of really just flying by the seat of their pants, and really sort of exemplifying what Saul Goodman said in court, where without me, Walter White would have been dead or in prison within a month. In many respects, yeah, they got lucky, Sam Fisher. They did for sure. And you wonder if that guard. Again, you wonder, he was making his rounds, but maybe after he makes his rounds, he goes really far away back to the, wherever the guards are stationed, kind of akin to a Nippy in Better Call Saul, where they would be in the sort of closed circuit room with all the cameras at night, but at the same time, they would make their rounds and stuff like that. So I don't know how much time they had, but yeah, they did get really lucky by the fact that because he used the bathroom and they tied him up, they basically had way, way more time than they would have had if he didn't go to the bathroom here. So at Stone Yoda, couldn't have said it better myself. These hijinks when they were amateurs are golden. The show got much more darker later seasons. Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I was thinking about the sort of Dead Freight heist, robbing that methylamine compared to robbing this methylamine. So great scene where they tie him up here. Pretty hilarious, where the guard is just using the bathroom, reading the magazine. And Jesse kind of saying it's going to be loud. We'll find out in about 10 seconds. And again, I love this shot right here where we can just see the fear on Jesse Pinkman's face, kind of being like, what is happening right now? But again, I do wonder if it was sort of an intentional direction by whoever was directing this episode, where they basically said, Jesse kind of looked fearful here, and Walt, like I said, it's sort of the theme that I've alluded to again and again when I was talking about this episode with like Walt, the cancer diagnosis, nothing to lose. And again, this is a man who is just living in the moment, who is just fearless right now. And it's sort of the main overarching theme of this show, where, when you have a character like with this unbelievable intelligence like Walter White, and how a character like this can turn into Scarface from Mr. Chips following this cancer diagnosis. And it's really kind of crazy to see sort of the creation that emerges from Walter White following his circumstances changing. And yeah, he's a savage. I would agree. At Stone Yoda, that's a great way to put it for sure, where he is just fearless here. I have nothing to lose. Even if I get caught, I'm going to be dead in a matter of months more, very, very likely. But Jesse, of course, being young and sort of, all caught up in all of this, being much more fearful without the terminal lung cancer diagnosis, being a young man in his 20s, as opposed to being, just turning 50 and having nothing to lose. I really feel like the sort of emotions they're expressing here in the scene are on just perfectly sum up these two characters. And like I said, this is one of my favorite scenes in Breaking Bad. It's absolutely amazing. Everything you could have wanted and more. And yeah, great scene here for sure where he says, "Where are the gallon jugs?" And again, they thought that gallon jugs would be here. They both could carry sort of 4 pounds, or no, I guess 4 gallons of methylamine. But of course, they don't have the gallon jugs, so they just decide to take this big barrel. And again, we can see them just kind of really struggling with the weight of this barrel. And I did sort of wonder. I'm not sure if anyone knows this. Is this a 50-gallon drum, if I'm not mistaken? Is this maybe 50-gallon or 30-gallon? But yeah, this is going to be really heavy. I'm not sure. I did a quick Google search of how much like a 50-gallon drum of water would weigh, and I think, if I could be mistaken, but it could weigh almost like 400 or 500 pounds. That doesn't even seem right. I wonder how much 50 gallons of a liquid would weigh. I feel like that'd be a lot of weight. And it is kind of true where, it is a barrel. Why didn't they roll it? Wouldn't that have been so much easier and faster? And where they're kind of, doing the sort of least rational decision whatsoever. And again, you can't blame them. I mean, in the moment, they're sort of just in tunnel vision here. They kind of want to get out of here. And they're in such tunnel vision, they're not even realizing how stupid their decision is, where they literally could push it and roll it. And it would be so much easier, as Hank Schrader said in the very next season when he finally sees the South Boston Annalyn heist tape when Steve Gomez brings it to him when APD kicks it their way. But yeah, pretty hilarious for sure in many respects. Absolutely comedy gold to see these two guys struggling with this incredibly heavy barrel. But hey, it wasn't how they drew it up on the board. But they got the job done at the end of the day. They got away with it, and they got their precursor, and they'll absolutely be able to make their 4 pounds of methamphetamine for Tuco Salamanca. All right, then kind of getting into the sort of last stage of the first season of Breaking Bad, we then pan to them, I guess, the next day when they're about to trudge out to the Indian reservation like they had done in the past to cook this methamphetamine. But of course, the engine totally blows up, and they realize that they're not going anywhere. And as Jesse Pinkman says, and we're not cooking in my driveway, that's for damn sure. At Sam Fisher, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Really appreciate the support, man. Walt doesn't fear anything. He uses this to his advantage many times in the series. The only time he is fearful is when his family is threatened. Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and additionally, I remember he was quite fearful when his own life was threatened when he thought Mike was going to kill him in the season 3 finale in the episode entitled Full Measure. I feel like that fear was pretty genuine at Sam Fisher. When he kind of said, please, you don't have to do this. Like, please, I'm begging you, don't take me down in the basement of the laundry and kill me. So there's definitely some fear there. That's for sure. That one comes to mind. But I feel like he doesn't have any fear when he's in control of these situations, even when they're illegal situations that he finds himself in at Sam Fisher. I feel like there is fear, but it's sort of only when there's sort of lack of control. Not really fear when he's doing something illegal. There's no fear of sort of legal reprisals, I fear. Especially not at this point in the series, because he truly has nothing to lose. He has nothing. He has nothing to show for all of this. He has no money. If he's dead, he's dead. Then he doesn't have to worry about all the problems that he has. But yeah, that's an interesting point you make. And you also say I think he was only fearful is because he couldn't provide more for his family. And okay, I see what you're saying there for sure. Where it wasn't so much a fear of his own death and mortality as it was fear that he was going to leave his family with nothing. I suppose. Yeah, I can see that for sure. I think he was Yeah, that's true. He was stalling them, trying to. And again, but in the sort of grand sort of premise that you're discussing, I imagine. Yeah, I guess I can see that, how he's not truly afraid of his own the sort of the physical nature of his own death, as opposed to the fact that he's going to disappear without a trace and his family's not going to be provided for. And again, it kind of reminds me a little bit of when Lydia was about to die in season 5 of Breaking Bad, I believe in the episode entitled Madrigal, when Mike basically goes to her house in Houston to shoot her in the face after she ordered the hit on him. Her basically saying, like, just all I ask is you don't shoot me in the face. I don't want my daughter to see me this way. And it wasn't so much the fear of her being dead as she was overcome with the fear of her, of her daughter thinking that she just abandoned her. She couldn't go. She was fearful of that. Where in her dying moment, she wanted her daughter. She'd rather her daughter think my mother was murdered as opposed to my mother was a sort of bum that just ran out on me and disappeared and left me without a trace. So yeah, it's an interesting point you make for sure at Sam Fisher. There again. I definitely noticed this lack of fear that Walter White has. That is for sure. And it's true. I don't think he's sort of, we hear the speeches about, all life comes with a death sentence and, you go out there and, I used to be afraid of things that may happen, but ever since my cancer diagnosis, I sleep just fine. Telling, Hank after his post-traumatic stress following him witnessing the death of the Federale and the other DEA agent getting his leg blown off in Juarez, and him basically saying, you go out there and you kick that bastard as hard as you can right in the teeth. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I see what you mean. I don't think there's sort of fear of his own mortality anymore at this point in his life. He sort of maybe conquered that fear, but yeah, I guess the fear kind of comes from just him not being able to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish in this life. In the sort of same way that Lydia wasn't truly afraid of her demise as much as what her demise would symbolize to her daughter, just based on how it was presented to her after the fact. So yeah, really interesting points you raised at Sam Fisher, especially post Hank death. He doesn't care about his safety at all at his safety. Yeah, I mean at that point, talk about really having nothing to lose at that point. So if you think he had nothing to lose in season 1, following the death of Hank and him being a wanted man, he really had nothing to lose there. That is for sure. And yeah, kind of another side note here. I always noticed this too. I don't know if anyone else noticed this. Jesse Pinkman wearing the old school Arizona State University T-shirt here. I always wondered about that. He never went to the school. I always kind of found it kind of funny how he was a shout out to this sort of school in Arizona when they're in New Mexico. I always wondered about that on his My Shout page that we saw in the second episode of this first season. We kind of see that. Didn't he say he got some education at DeVry or something to that effect? But he definitely never went to Arizona State, at least based on anything that we know. Maybe his ex gave it to him. Yeah, who knows? Who knows the story? I always wondered, like, what was the story behind the Arizona State University T-shirt? I always wonder about that. I don't know, maybe the sort of the devil mascot, there's some sort of deep-seated symbolism that was trying to be attributed by the creators here in the scene by wear this shirt. But yeah, just kind of an interesting side note there for sure. Always wondered about that shirt. And at the same time, pretty hilarious scene here where following Jesse saying, we're not cooking in our driveway, instead immediately juxtaposed with this barrel rolling down the stairs. Adjacent Arizona State is a notorious party school. It's on brand that Jesse would wear their shirt. All right, that's cool. I wasn't too familiar with that. I would imagine all sort of big state schools are kind of like that. But yeah, that is interesting for sure. Shout out to Paul Sura, if I'm not mistaken, the public address announcer for the Arizona Coyotes. Speaking of the Arizona shout out. So yeah, shout out to anyone who's from Arizona. I don't think I've ever been. I've only driven through, if I must say. But yeah, I always wondered about that shirt. But anyway, yeah, continuing here. Pretty hilarious scene where he says, what part of slow it down did you not understand? And yeah, honestly, throwing this down the stairs probably way easier than carrying this 100 plus pound barrel down this awkward narrow flight of stairs. But pretty hilarious scene when the banging and clanging of this huge barrel down the stairs is juxtaposed with Walt saying, what part of slow it down did you not understand? And of course, this is then followed by, they're just about to cook in Jesse's basement because they really are out of options here. They can't cook anywhere else. They're not going to cook at Walt's house. The RV is totally busted. They can't drive it out to the reservation anymore. And of course, Walt says, is your agent, when she coming by? And then Jesse's like, oh yeah, right on, great point. I'll call her, tell her not to come. But of course, the grand irony and the thing they don't check on is that there's an actual open house scheduled for the day, which they're manufacturing the methamphetamine in the basement. We then sort of see the sort of backstory premise of Walter White's plan here, where he basically says we're going to have to run for another couple hours if we want to make 4.5 pounds. And then Jesse, of course, says, why not 2? And, the 2 pounds, the 4 pounds would, I guess, pay, the 2 pounds would pay back to go for last week. And or no, he says not 4.5, but anyway, long story long, the 4.5 pounds will pay back Tuco and will put us $44,000 ahead each. So that's why it needs to be 4.5 pounds. And as he even says, based on the methylamine that we stole last night, we'll be able to make 4.5 pounds, 4 pounds for the foreseeable future. Jesse basically saying how long is that going to be, because of course you have terminal lung cancer. How much more money do you need? And Walt basically saying, I need more. I need infinity amount of money, theoretically. Of course, the grand irony in the premiere of the very next episode, he will say, he needs 737,000, and of course, that is even the grand irony in the grand scheme of things. It's never enough. The $5 million buyout that happens in season 5, when Jesse recalls, I remember when you said you just needed 737,000, you worked it out all mathematically and shit. And now you're getting over more than 5 times that much in 5 million. You can have everything. You can retire, spend time with your family. But of course, the way the Heisenberg ego builds over the course of 5 seasons is not just about the money. But that's sort of the little seed that's being planted here in respect to the sort of money aspect of Walter White's story, and in the grand scheme of things, a very crucial part of the Breaking Bad story for sure, and definitely something that will be extremely crucial. The sort of the amount of money that Walter White acquires as it pertains to what is going on in the story between Jesse and Walt in this over the course of these the seasons to come of Breaking Bad following the season 1 finale. At Sam Fisher, why they continue to deal with Tuco? I mean, because Walt wanted the money. Walt needed the money. That's basically that's the way I see it. They need the money despite the fact that he is a homicidal maniac, and as as Walt will learn, whatever craziness he thinks of Tuco, with him being, he's a reasonable businessman which I can do business with, he's going to learn very quickly at the end of this season that that is a little bit naive and foolish of him to even have that thought process. And we really kind of see the naivete of Walter White and him truly not realizing the level of danger of the person he is dealing with right here and right now in this point in the timeline of Breaking Bad. But yeah, so flash forwarding here, this is of course then juxtaposed with this hilarious scene where, they find out that the open house is scheduled. My goodness, this scene right here, when Walt kind of shushes the little girl, hilarious here. Just absolutely hilarious where, the door opens, she sees this man in this respirator and this, lab equipment basically telling her to shush, her almost being like a deer in the headlights here. Just, absolutely hilarious scene here through and through. Walt basically saying, was, again, long story long, was, basically saying there was an open house scheduled for today by any chance, and Jesse saying it's not my fault, I told her not to come here. Of course, I'm saying I don't care what you do, just you keep them out of here, understand? And of course, when push comes to shove and someone tries to, again, actually, that's a little bit later, but yeah, great, yeah, you ain't seen the basement, you got that? Great scene for sure. But of course, before we get to that scene, we first get a continuation of the scene of Marie and Skyler, where Skyler finally gets the opportunity to confront Marie about the stolen tiara. When she realizes that, she stole it after she tries to return it to Zachary's. And of course, Marie totally plays dumb here, saying, I don't know what you want me to apologize for. Not admitting to her kleptomania. Of course, Skyler just completely taken aback by this, flabbergasted, beyond the pale here, completely vexed, just leaves. Unbelievable by her sister not owning up to what she did here. Another legendary scene. Are you talking about the scene of Skyler and Marie? I don't know if I call it legendary, but yeah, pretty great scene here in many respects. And like I said, goes back to the sort of broad theme of legal, illegal, and in many respects, I did a quick kind of Google search of kleptomania, and a lot of it can be associated to like a mental disorder and just the sort of impulse and like the lack of impulse control in terms of stealing. But I guess in many respects, I think the sort of point that maybe we're trying to make here is that drug use can kind of be attributed in the same way, maybe the sort of lack of impulse control when using like narcotics, in the same way that, for whatever reason, Marie has this lack of impulse control with her shoplifting. Again, I'm not 100% sure on all of this. I'm not an expert, but just kind of an interesting sort of, really like tying a bow on the theme of just what is illegal, what is illegal. So I thought it was a derogatory term, not a medical condition. I don't know. The thing I saw, I think kleptomania or kleptomaniacy, I don't know the word is, but I think it is a medical condition. It's kind of interesting. Like, from what I read about it, like, a lot of people don't know exactly where it stems from, but it's the same thing with substance abuse. I feel like people they don't know where exactly the sort of the this why people use drugs. I feel like if they knew it, they would almost ironically invent a drug which can sort of turn off the mechanism in your brain which makes you want to use these drugs. And I think it's such a complicated, multifaceted thing where it really doesn't exist. And it is kind of like scary just how little we understand the human mind, even to this day, how our sort of understanding of the science of like the human mind is really in its infancy. It's kind of crazy when we think about it. Just, even like the what we don't know about like things like consciousness, and even it's so true we don't really know why, where a lot of these mental disorders come from. When you read them, there's like sort of general consensuses of possibilities, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. The human mind is a really sort of crazy thing that I really feel like people don't really understand. But yeah, really interesting point for sure. But yeah, kind of a interesting scene here where we see the continuation of Walt and Jesse cooking in the basement. This is, of course, juxtaposed with the open house. We see this patron, or I guess person visiting the open house, sort of being taken aback by the bad smell. And of course, the hilarious scene when the real estate agent tries to cover it up with the aerosol spray, but of course, when push comes to shove, Jesse does as he's supposed to do. When he basically says the basement is occupied, the guy's saying it's not a bathroom, and basically saying, you ain't seen the basement, bitch. You got that? Everyone out. House is not for sale. Walter White nodding in approval, like, all right, he's stepping up to the plate. He's doing what he's supposed to do. And it's heavily implied to us that they didn't sell the house, clearly, because Jesse continues to live in it. And Walt and Jesse were able to manufacture the 4.5 pounds they wanted to manufacture in order to pay back Tuco and have them go up 40 grand and change each. So yeah, it's Sean Crowley. I actually went into quite the deep, at least my version of a deep analysis with of that scene a little bit earlier in the stream. If you want to check that out for sure, yeah, definitely get into that for sure. And the sort of that theme of legal versus illegal, which is really a key central theme here in this episode. I really sort of got in depth in that one for sure, and I'm not so sure that YouTube appreciates that in terms of the algorithm. But what are you going to do? It's a really interesting subject matter that is really intriguing to talk about. But yeah, following this, Walter White returns home from his Navajo sweat lodge that he said he was going to when he told Skylar he was going away for the weekend. Of course, Skylar says, that must have been quite an experience. How was the experience? Taken aback by the smell of the methamphetamine, and based on everything we learned from Breaking Bad, again, I'm no expert on this. I've never smelled a meth lab before. I don't know what it smells like, but as Todd Alquist said to Jesse Pinkman when they were just about to chemically disincorporate, or I think following chemically disincorporating Drew Sharp's body, I think the methylamine and the meth smells like cat piss. I think that's the way that I've heard it described to me on the internet, as well as what they wrote into Todd Alquist's dialogue in this series. So Skylar kind of taken aback by the smell, kind of a callback to the pilot as well, where Walt is cooking in his underpants because he doesn't want to go back smelling like a meth lab. Clearly, he did go back and smell like a meth lab here because I guess he could have cooked in his underwear, but he decided not to. Of course, he justifying the alibi by saying they're sacred Navajo herbs that smell really bad. Skylar just accepting this at face value. Of course, her being a little bit preoccupied and consumed with the fact that she called out Marie on the fact that when she tried to return the tiara to Zachary's, it was stolen by Marie, and she refused to admit it. Walt kind of taken aback by this revelation here by Skylar. And of course, he uses it as an opportunity, I guess, to sort of, test the waters, if you will, and sort of see what Skylar's reaction would be if he did it as well, kind of saying, what would you do if it was me, if I stole? Would you, call the police, put me in jail? And of course, Skylar's saying you don't want to know. And of course, the sort of lighthearted thing about this is that, again, I guess there's sort of definitely levels of crime, if you will, where, smoking a Cuban cigar and shoplifting. I mean, my goodness, if you read about in certain cities now, I mean, you can steal up to what, $1,000+ of a merchandise and it's only a misdemeanor. I mean, for Marie, I mean, that's what, a $500-600 tiara. So by today's standards in certain cities in this country, that's nothing. That's like a misdemeanor. That's hardly a crime at all. But it is kind of interesting, the sort of degrees of crimes, and maybe sort of a Walt kind of saying to Skylar, what would you do if it was me? Skylar sort of jokingly saying, you don't want to know. Of course, the underlying aspect and all of, at the same time, I almost forgot that, some people do things for their families. Of course, making this, subtly about him, unbeknownst to Skylar, truly what he's sort of getting at here, where he's manufacturing and distributing methamphetamine. He's doing something illegal for their family, for his family, in the same way that maybe you could sort of twist and manipulate and justify Marie's actions as stealing this tiara for her sister, wanting to provide her something nice, but it doesn't really make sense because she could afford to buy it if she wanted to, and it probably is kleptomania or kleptomaniacy, whatever the word is. It's probably Marie suffering from being a kleptomaniac, as opposed to her doing this for some sort of underlying noble reason. And I guess it's kind of the irony too here, where Walter White is sort of justifying himself as doing this for a noble reason, but again, who knows? Maybe if you spoke to a sort of psychotherapist or something like that, maybe they would say these are sort of all of Walter White's actions here are just based on his own sort of mental illness as well. Again, up to the interpretation of the viewer. But yeah, just kind of a really coming full circle here in that storyline where, what would you do if it was me? Kind of Skylar saying, you don't want to know, you don't want to find out. And thus sort of ending the story of Walt and Skylar here in season 1 of Breaking Bad. And yeah, Justin Cruz again. I don't know all the nitty gritty of all of that, but again, it's sort of the theme that I sort of see is the sort of blurred lines of legal and illegal, and that's sort of the what I saw in all of this. So kind of a just interesting sort of back and forth that I discussed over the course of this episode. But of course, following this, we then sort of see the things that some people do for their families being displayed to us in this next scene here, where Walt gives Tuco this 4.5 pounds of methamphetamine. And of course, Tuco is very taken aback by this because he says, what is this shit? This is blue. Walter White's saying, we use an entirely different chemical process, but it is every bit as pure. Jesse's saying it may be blue, but it's the bomb. Tuco bumping it and realizing that it's the real deal. Tight. Yeah, blue, yellow, pink, whatever, man. Just keep bringing me this. And yeah, a lot going on here. I mean, there's a couple of things, I kind of want to wrap up in respect to the blue meth. It was definitely apparently written here into the story because Vince Gilligan wanted to give Walter White's meth a sort of signature color. But in the grand scheme of things, it is kind of irony where it does have a sort of distinguishing factor. But I almost feel like that's sort of a double-edged sword where, I don't know, it's almost more of a calling card, if you will, and makes it stand out more as opposed to just being very, very pure white meth, where I feel like you could only notice it at a very, very close distance as opposed to being able to see it from miles away. And it's kind of interesting. If you go into the scene here, the meth is nowhere near as blue as it was over the course of Breaking Bad. I mean, if you go back and look at the sort of blue meth that they were making in the super lab, it was way, way bluer than this meth. I mean, it's like this hardly has a blue tint in it at all. If I can sort of find, I could probably play this for like a second. See if I can sort of there's a good close up shot here if I can play. Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is hardly blue at all. I mean, this hardly has a bluish tint to it. This sort of reminds me of the sort of slightly blue meth that Todd Alquist was cooking at Jack Walker's compound. So Yeah, at Stone Yo, that's a sort of another sort of component of all this as well. I definitely know the season was a shorter and it wasn't intended to be 7 episodes, but the writer's strike made it be 7. I definitely think that the Jesse Pinkman's character was also initially written to eventually, I think, die in season 1. That was also a potential possibility, but then they decided against it just based on the sort of chemistry that Walt and Jesse had, and that, of course, ended up being the sort of main underlying theme of Breaking Bad. Um, and at the same time, yeah, it's yeah, Ed Henna. Yeah, I talked about that scene a little bit earlier for sure. But yeah, the blue product here that Walter White has here that Vince Gilligan wanted to make stand out and give a distinguishing quality to. And of course, I definitely saw this online as well about how his meth was 99.1% pure. And I think they said it's physically impossible to have 100% pure meth that is any other color but white. So that's why it couldn't be 100% pure, and how I guess theoretically there could be a blue meth that is 99.1% pure, but 100% pure meth physically could not be blue, at least from my quick internet research. And of course, Walter White is compensated here for the money that he gets from Tuco. Tuco basically saying, we're going to make a lot of money together. This guy can cook. Great scene here where Walt, right before No Dose says the money dialogue here, where he says, we're going to make a lot of money together. Again, trying to find this. All right, I don't want to try to skip ahead a little bit here. Where's the scene? Trying to, yeah, right here. Oh, yeah, it's a little bit out of focus. But yeah, so again, it's right before sort of No Dose make this dialogue where Walt's holding his, 70 plus grand here. Probably closer to like, 80 grand with well, I guess is the half. So it'd be, yeah, so probably closer to like 80 grand and change. 88 grand, I guess, right around there. And, Tuco basically saying, this guy can cook. We're going to make a lot of money together. Sort of the naivete of Walter thinking, all right, I'm going to cook the meth. I'm going to sell it to this guy. He's a sort of, he's a man of business. He's a businessman, sort of what he was thinking about, how Crazy 8 may have been. We can do this transaction. This is all going to work out great. I'm going to make, so much money. I'm going to make, 140 pounds, $140,000 a week. Right? I mean, 4 pounds a week is they're getting 35,000 a pound. So that's what is my math screwing up here completely? Yeah. So that'd be like what, $140,000 a week? I mean, that's some pretty good money there for sure. I mean, you're gonna make a lot of money together, as Tuco says. Tuco's gonna be the one in the South Valley who's pushing Walter White's meth, not Gus Fring as he will in season 2. But of course, just based on Tuco's unbelievably erratic nature, absolutely compounded by the fact that he's using methamphetamine, which is making him more aggressive. No Dose makes this sort of innocuous comment of just remember who you're working for. Tuco's kind of affronted by this, little comments where he could have thought nothing of it and just moved on, or he could have sort of ripped him a new asshole verbally speaking and not physically murdered him by beating the absolute living shit out of him. But of course, Tuco ends up, being affronted by this dialogue. Definitely a great callback to season 1 of Better Call Saul when No Dose also makes that comment in the desert with Nacho and Saul present, and Tuco goes up to him and says, "Stop helping," kind of, bringing the story full circle. Tuco kind of saying, why did you say what you, or did you say, are you saying they're an idiot? Are you saying I'm an idiot? Of course, it's so trivial. It's really nothing. Tuco could really just let this go, but, tends not to be the most rational decision maker when he's using, and in many respects, this sort of irrational decision making will end up will lead to his death in the next season in the episode entitled Grilled, when he lets his guard down with Walt and Jesse, following Walt kind of telling him to calm down and relax. Tuco at first, laughs and says, Heisenberg says relax, let's all just relax here. But of course, this is then followed by Tuco just, sucker punching No Dose and just absolutely pummeling his face. And of course, this scene in many respects needed to happen because it totally destroyed and blew up any fantasy that Walter White may have had that, This is like any other business transaction. This is like opening up a small business where I sell you a product, and then you sell the product to someone else. You create a different product, and it's all above board. It's all legal, taxable income, minus the taxes, because this is all under the table. And this is going to be great. This is going to be simple. This is going to be awesome. No problem. This is going to be great. I'm going to be skipping along and making hundreds of thousands of dollars a week. But of course, this scene here, which will absolutely be hammered home in the very next episode, displays to us that Walter White is just realizing just the absolute gravity of the situation that he's in, and it's truly displaying to us that Tuco is this dead-eyed killer that Jesse Pinkman said he was when he was taken aback by the fact that he even made a deal with him in the first place. Tuco is so under the influence here, and I guess almost has like a methamphetamine strength. I mean, I've seen videos on like Cops, the TV show, where people who are tasered will not be affected by the taser who are under the influence of the substance. Of course, Tuco, very proud of him absolutely annihilating No-Dose here, says, all right, Heisenberg, next week. But of course, despite Walt initially thinking, all right, I did it here. I found a guy, I found a distributor, the person I could sell my product to wholesale. We acquired the methamphetamine. We have a means of producing it. We can sell it to him. He gives us, look at all the money I'm holding in my hand right now. This is flawless. I did it. I won. I succeeded. It only took a couple weeks, maybe a month, or a little more than a month, because I think he about hit his diagnosis for about a month. So literally a month and change, I figured it out. I'm going to leave my family all this money. I did it. It's a very simple transaction, but of course, this is the sort of monkey wrench that's thrown into the situation, the bottleneck here, and the sort of consequences and the fallout of which Walter White will have to handle in the very next season, which thus displays to us why this final scene was written into this shortened season 1 finale of this episode that was shortened of the season that was shortened because of the writer's strike that was happening, I believe, in 2007, 2008. So yeah, I agree. Headstone Yoda. Like, shout out to all the OGs as I have who watched Breaking Bad originally on television, way back in the day, I believe in 2008, and Yeah, 2008. So quite the season. I mean, I was absolutely hooked. I mean, I don't know about you, but back in the day in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, as soon as this episode ended, I started watching the next one. I mean, if I wasn't already hooked, this one it did the trick. I was absolutely hooked after this unbelievable episode here, which had everything you could have wanted and more. So many amazing scenes. I love that Southwestern Annalyn scene. I love the sort of all the various themes that were written into this episode. And we get to see the continuing developments of the character of Heisenberg. We see the continuing developments of all the secondary characters like Hank and Marie and even Skyler. Walter Jr. to a lesser extent in this episode, and Jesse Pinkman. We see the Tuco, like I talked about in the previous review, how Tuco is really only appears in 4 episodes of Breaking Bad on screen alive, but he has such a crucial role in this story. And like I talked about too, Walt had no idea of who he was dealing with here. He and Jesse had no idea who this Salamanca was, and just how much gravitas and pull this Salamanca name has in the Albuquerque criminal underworld. So yeah, unbelievable scene here. It was torture, LOL. Oh, Kate Valentine, you said what you watched it on TV. If that's what you're saying was torture, that was torture. I mean, man, I can only imagine the cliffhanger there. I mean, I thought it was bad waiting 6-7 weeks to see what happened following Howard Hamlin getting shot in the head by Lalo Salamanca during the part 1 finale of season 6 of Better Call Saul. So it's only 4 episodes. I think he was in a Crazy Handful of Nothing, a No Rough Stuff type deal. 737 and Grilled. He was killed and grilled, and again we see his mugshot over the course of Breaking Bad. But yeah, he's only in 4 episodes, and in Better Call Saul, he's only in 3 if I'm not mistaken. He's in the Uno premiere at the very end. He's in Miho in the very beginning, and then we see him beating the crap out of Mike in Grilled, or right? Was that, no, not Grilled, in Gloves Off. Excuse me, in Gloves Off in season 2. So yeah, quite the it's crazy. Only 7 episodes in this entire universe, but a very very crucial character and one of my favorites. I mean, really a really great sort of first villain, if you will, that was interjected into the series as the main sort of antagonist, and just it's crazy to think about just the entire universe that was built off of this one character, the Salamanca universe, and how Gus Fring ties into this, and the sort of the decade long sort of cat and mouse game between Hector and Gus, and just the fact that these two characters have absolute animosity to one another. Just the unbelievable story that was crafted and written following the introduction of Tuco Salamanca. Just unbelievable at the time. And of course, there's no way in the world that all this was concocted when this character Tuco was written into this show in season 1 at the time, but that's the nature of this universe, and that's just a shout out to these unbelievable creators who crafted this unbelievable story. So yeah, great way to wrap up season 1 of Breaking Bad, and again, it was great to watch it. I enjoyed watching it even the 20-30th time as I did, prior to me talking about the episode here. Yeah, you wonder at Hine. You wonder if it was just sun protection, or you wonder if he was sort of like putting on a persona there. You wonder even at the time. I mean, maybe at the moment it didn't have a symbolism, but again, the symbolism kind of came afterwards at Hine for Walter White. The symbolism came afterwards. So, as Stu Lerner, Rip Howard, I agree, Rip Howard for sure. So that was a tough one, man. That was a tough one for sure. And Michael Curtis shot out as well. I can only imagine what it was like. Wow, you were watching all the way back in season 1 of Breaking Bad. I did not start watching on TV until part 1 of season 5. That is the truth. The first episode I ever watched on TV was Live Free or Die. It was crazy. So yeah, Luke Cockburn. Wow, it's pretty wild to think he left such an impact in 7 episodes and not many scenes in the episodes, especially the amount he spoke of. Yeah, it's very, very true. Very, very true. I can't speak for other shows, but it's one of the things I love about this show. How even the smallest characters, and I wouldn't classify Tuco as a small character, but even characters that don't have a lot of on-screen time are still unbelievably consequential. I mean, characters like Tuco, Gail Bedecker. It's unreal. It's one of my favorite things about this show. How some of the smallest secondary characters are so crucial to this overall story. So. Ooh, but yeah, yeah. I mean, Lyle to a lesser extent, but I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying at Luke Cockburn. I see for sure what you're saying there. So, ooh, but with that being said, I think I'm gonna have to wrap it up here. It's actually quite late where I am, but yeah, like I said, really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Shout out to Sam Fisher and to Kate Valentine for the super chats. I really appreciate the support on this channel. Thank you so much. Like I said, it was quite a while since I did one of these reviews, but again, it was I enjoyed talking about them for sure. But like I said, I have a lot going on in my real life, so I'm not sure when again I'm gonna have time to do another one of these streams. But for everyone who tuned in tonight, I really appreciate it. I really enjoy talking about the show. I probably should do them more closer together. It's kind of, I feel like the lulls are kind of not a good thing, but it is what it is. I'm sorry. It's all I'm able to do right now. Definitely considering talking about other types of content too in the future. Who knows? I mean, I was initially gravitating towards talking about other television shows, but I was like, I don't know. I don't know if any show really sort of tickles my passion, if for really kind of getting into another TV show. I'm not 100% sure, but who knows? Who knows what's out there? I may talk about unrelated TV things. Who knows what's to come. A lot going on. It's kind of crazy right now. It's like the end of the year and like the holidays and stuff like that in the U.S. So lots of good shows out there. Lots of things to potentially talk about. But yeah, I will definitely post in the community tab next time I'm doing one of these. And like I said, really appreciate everyone for tuning in tonight. Have a great Wednesday if you're on the East Coast of the U.S. Have a great rest of your Tuesday if you're anywhere else in the U.S. or in Canada. Again, I'm not 100% sure on the time zones, but shout out to Canada and all the people watching in Canada as well. And I will see you guys around. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Take it easy. I'll see you when I see you.